Servant of God Julia Greeley, Denver's very own Angel of Mercy, as she is called there, was born into slavery. She was never told her age, but biographers believe she was born between 1833 and 1848. She grew up at the Samuel B. Caldwell Plantation in the community of Woodland, Missouri. When she was a child, the slave master whipped her in the face, blinding her in one eye. It never fully healed and oozed liquid for the rest of her life. Like most slaves, Julia was separated from her family and relatives. She was eventually freed by the Missouri Emancipation Act in 1865. Julia was hired as a cook and nanny by Dr. Paul Robinson and his wife, Lena, and she worked for them for 9 years. While she was there, Julia met and became friends with Lena's sister, Julia Pratt Dickerson, a widow with 4 children. Later, Miss Dickerson met and married William Gilpin. The couple moved to Denver in the late 1870s, and Julia came with them to serve as the family's caretaker. Settling in Colorado, William became the governor. Mrs. Gilpin was a very devout and faithful Catholic, and it was she who introduced Julia to the Catholic faith. Through her instruction, Julia was baptized and entered the Catholic Church at the Sacred Heart Jesuit Community in 1880. Julia became such a fervent and faithful member of the church that she even rented her own pew, which was a common practice at the time. However, usually renting a pew was a claim of status, and some women in the church didn't like to see a poor woman who was a former slave get the best pew in the church. And it was the best pew. It was all the way up front near the altar in front of the life-size crucifix. Though most people treated Julia with respect, she did experience racism at times. Her former employer, William Gilpin, who is no longer governor, wanted to divorce his wife. In order to do so, he came up with a list of 25 reasons why he wanted to divorce his wife, Julia being one of those reasons. And so Julia was summoned to court. William Gilpin accused his wife as being irrational when she brought Julia, a lewd and undisciplined black woman, into his home, and that she was a threat to his children. There is nothing to these claims, and so Julia was free to go. Other times, children would innocently sing songs they overheard, which were filled with racial slurs. Another time, a little girl was afraid to shake Julia's hand because she thought it might turn her skin black. Julia responded by kissing the little girl on the cheek and saying, "This is a holy child." But the children loved Julia and didn't realize the words they were saying were hurtful. She in turn loved them as well. In fact, she would often arrange picnics for the children, sometimes for groups as big as 8 or 9 children, and then she would take them for trolley rides. Loving to joke around, she would tell the conductors that they were her children. One girl remembered, "We would come home happy and tired, Julia the happiest of all because she had spent the day with her children." Julia spent her days being an apostle for the city of Denver. Every morning she would start her day with a fast, usually skipping breakfast. Then she would go to daily mass. The parish priest, who knew of Julia's fasts, would always ask if she had her breakfast, and Julia would always respond, "Holy Communion is my breakfast." Then she would spend her day helping wherever help was needed. If someone in the parish had died, she would visit the family and help by cooking for the reception. If the family was poor, which many were, she would make sure they had the appropriate clothing for the funeral, as many didn't. This she accomplished by begging. Julia knew what it was like to be poor and overlooked. She understood the humiliation that made people want to avoid participation rather than be judged. After all, she was judged every day, and due to the color of her skin and her dreary clothes, she had to fight for her own church pew. For this reason, Julia begged for items for the poor during the day. She would take a little red wagon, begging for clothes, groceries, coal, and other necessities. Then, to save the pride of the white people who might be too embarrassed to take charity from a black woman, she would deliver the items at night when no one else would see. When she heard that some of the teen girls in her parish weren't attending church activities because they felt they didn't have nice enough clothes, Julia went to some of the wealthier neighborhoods to ask them to share their clothing. She would then deliver the hand-me-down dresses to the poor girls at night. There were times when people would cheat or take advantage of Julia's generosity, thinking as a poor, ignorant former slave, she wouldn't notice. But Julia was smarter than what people gave her credit for. She had an excellent memory and had taught herself to play the piano, even playing and singing the entire Gregorian Mass upon the request of a friend that she was visiting. No, she wasn't naive, but she felt it was more important to give rather than to stop giving, so she continued and trusted that God could deal with those who cheated and stole from her. Julia dealt with the unfair treatment of people and the hardships of life by using her sense of humor. She made light of herself and wasn't shy about making light of others. One time, since she couldn't read or write, she asked one of the Jesuits to write a letter for her as she composed it. When she was finished, she pretended to look it over and said teasingly, "Please excuse the poor spelling and penmanship." Another time, her sense of humor gave a baby a name. When a family from her parish told Julia that they couldn't come up with a name for their newborn son, Julia looked at the baby and jokingly said, "I hereby name you Francis Xavier Lee," and the name stuck. When Julia had joined the parish, she became a member of the Sacred Heart League and the Apostleship of Prayer. She took it so seriously that her parish priest said he had never seen anyone so enthusiastic about spreading devotion to the Sacred Heart. She would walk an average of 22 miles per month, handing out pamphlets and literature of the Apostleship of Prayer and the Sacred Heart League to people. She walked so much, in fact, that after she died, an autopsy showed that she had suffered from arthritis, especially in her feet. However, she suffered in secret and no one ever knew. Before leaving, she would ask someone to please read the pamphlet to her so she knew what it said. That way, when she handed them out, she could explain what it was. She didn't feel it was enough to simply hand the pamphlets out. She wanted people to understand what they were missing if they refused it. Julia was also very active in her church, and she was there for every activity and supported every fundraiser. One time, the girls of the parish decided to run a beauty contest to raise money for the church. So Julia, always one to participate, entered the beauty contest and won. She was friends with the city firefighters, and she got them all to vote for Julia, which brought in $350 for the parish. You might be wondering how an unlikely friendship between an elderly former slave and a team of firefighters became friends. It was her deep concern for the firefighters' lives, which were always at risk, that brought her to them. No doubt she had also heard about the fire of 1863, when the city lost 4 of their firefighters. She would often stop by with pamphlets and encourage the firefighters to consecrate each day to the Sacred Heart. After her death, one of the firefighters later said that the pamphlets were tickets to heaven. Julia Greeley is quickly becoming known not just for her charity, but as someone who intercedes for those who aren't able to get pregnant. This comes not only for her love for children, but also because of the following story. One time, a woman confided to Julia that she had no children because her one infant son, who couldn't digest anything, starved to death, and the doctor told her she couldn't have any more children. Julia, deeply moved by the sad story, told the woman that she would pray and that by the next year, she would have a healthy little angel running about the house. Julia's prayers were answered, and the woman had a baby girl whom they named Marjorie. Out of gratefulness, the family hired Julia to be a nanny to Marjorie. This picture is the only known existing picture of Julia holding the little white angel, as Julia called her. Little Marjorie was holding a rosary when the picture was taken because Julia was in the middle of teaching her how to pray it. Every day, Julia would arrive at the house after attending daily Mass and then spend the day with Marjorie, praying and singing songs to the Sacred Heart. Then at 7 p.m., she would walk the 4 miles back to her boarding house and deliver any needed items to the poor at night before going to bed. She didn't just limit herself to giving to the poor. She also used her experience as a nanny to help tired mothers. If a mother seemed to need a break from her infant or sick child, Julia would spend the night caring for the child so that the sleep-deprived mother could go to bed. In 1901, Julia became a member of the Third Order of the Franciscans. She was already living a life of giving and begging, but she gave even more, if that was even possible. Any money she earned was used for others, and just the bare necessities for herself. She fed the poor from her own money, and if she didn't have anything left, she begged from others. One extremely cold night, Julia left a sack of potatoes on the back porch of a family she knew to be in need. After realizing the potatoes would freeze and spoil, she sent a neighborhood boy to alert the family to the gift by knocking on the door and running off. But she only gave in secret. She told a boy not to tell anyone that old Julia, as she called herself, sent him. She even gave away her own grave. She heard of an elderly African-American man who had just died and was to be buried in Potter's Field. She insisted this was not to be and gave up her own plot that she had obtained for herself to be used for the man instead. Julia Greeley died on June 7, 1918, at the age of 85. She was buried in her Franciscan habit, and as the news of her death spread through Denver, multitudes of people of every class came to pay their respects to the angel of charity. It's said that God can never be outdone in generosity. Julia had given away her own plot, and so God repaid her by giving her the honor of her body lying in repose in Sacred Heart's Church Loyola Chapel, which was a first for a Catholic layperson in Denver that has not since been repeated. She was then buried in Mount Olivet Cemetery, and later in 2017, her body was moved to Denver's Cathedral Basilica of the Immaculate Conception. She is the first to be interred there since it opened in 1912, and she's still got the best seat in the house. In 2016, her cause for beatification was opened, and 12,000 cases of answered prayers attributed to Julia's intercession have been sent to Rome for investigation.